Rudy, lots to talk about here. Tell me where you want to start. You want to talk about the Doug Ford, I'm not apologizing. Goddamn, it was the best ad I think I've ever seen. You want to talk about that?
Sure. We can start with that, Aaron.
Okay. What do you think? I mean, look, I asked this question of our listeners yesterday, and to be fair, I think there's a bit of a split opinion here. I think some people think it was a good thing to do because, hey, we got to do something, whereas other people think, no, it was a dumb thing to do because we should have anticipated how Donald Trump would react.
Yes, but the problem that we learned from yesterday from the presser from Doug Ford is that he did send the video to both Prime Minister Carney and his chief of staff. So the question is, yesterday Prime Minister Carney was asked about this ad and basically threw Doug Ford under the bus, but we learned that he was aware of it. So he could have stopped it, or maybe just silence means consent. So the question is Mark Carney using the Doug Ford video to basically saying, oh, we were making progress and everything blew out because of that ad, or they were not making progress, or maybe Mr. Carney had some very good reason to walk away from a deal with the U.S. because the conditions are too difficult, but he should have been upfront with Canadians and maybe not just blame it on the ad, the same way as I don't believe the version of President Trump that the ad is the only reason. We know that, for example, Canada has put counter tariff on autos, U.S. automobiles, because of what happened with GM and Ford. So maybe that was also something that President Trump is not saying the truth. So the whole question is, I do believe the ad was useful because at the end of the day, we need to send that message to the Americans that tariff is not good, that the inflation is going to go up, and possibly in a year from now, when there's going to be election at the Senate and at Congress, maybe the Trump administration is going to lose control of those both chambers. So that's also the long-term strategy that the Canadian government had from the start.
Okay, Rudy, with all due respect, I want to clarify a couple of things here. You mentioned the PMO, the Chief of Staff, knew this.
Yes.
We've not heard the Prime Minister confirm that he had seen the ad or knew anything about it, have we?
Yes, because he's not taking any question on it, and he didn't do any pressure on it. And today in the House of Commons, there was a lot of questions from the opposition, and surprised they didn't want to talk about it. So I do take the word of Doug Ford saying that he did send it to the Prime Minister and his Chief of Staff.
And secondly, you kind of made it seem like Donald Trump was just looking for an excuse to be able to do this, and you think this is the part that took him over the edge. Now this provided him the opportunity to say, I'm halting trade negotiations with Canada.
Yes, because 2 days before that ad, when it was already out, he was asked specifically on that ad, and he did say that he would have done the same thing. So how come one day he says, oh, I understand Canada and I understand what they're doing, and all of a sudden at 11 o'clock, 2 days after, he sends that message that all negotiations are off and blames it on the ad? How can he say good things about the ad one day and 2 days later say, oh, no, that's bad?
And of course, you know, the answer to that question is because he's Donald Trump and he does this all the time.
Yes, but also it's hurting him a lot because he did say that Canada will face some tariffs, a 10% tariff. We don't know when, we don't know how, but don't forget that the U.S. president cannot just put tariff because of an ad. Normally, he has special power when it's a security issue, not because he doesn't like an ad from another country. Normally, it's Congress who puts on tariff, and that is before the Supreme Court that is supposed to hear the case next week. So by saying that he's putting tariff on Canada because of the ad, he's actually weakened his power and his case, saying that he can put tariff because an ad is not a security issue.
Okay, again, I didn't want to just talk exclusively about this, but this idea of this going to the Supreme Court where they could, I guess, eventually decide, no, he's not allowed or shouldn't have been allowed to do this because the idea of a national emergency actually exists. This is a Republican-controlled Supreme Court. Do you really believe there'll be a decision against him?
But look, the reality is there's also a constitution, and sometimes they do have to apply the constitution even if they are Republican judges. And at the end of the day, the Congress has power when it comes to, for example, tariff, not only the U.S. president.
I will let it go by just reminding you that Donald Trump, when he's been asked about this before, because, you know, lately, the past couple of days, Rudy, he's been talking about another run in 2028, something that is prohibited in the Constitution. Doesn't seem to bother him as far as that's concerned.
But I understand that he said that he's not planning on doing it, or even there was some reports that maybe he'll be vice president and after the president will resign. But also he denied it. But again, we'll see what happens.
Okay.
But it will be very interesting to see the argument before the Supreme Court, because technically, again, if you read the Constitution, that it's only the Congress who can put on those tariffs, unless he can prove, and again, by saying that advertisement is a security issue, it's going to be hard to make that case, for example.
All right, let me move on to talk about this. I called it a draconian law with respect to doctors in Quebec that the provincial government passed on the weekend. There have been protests, there are going to be court challenges. What do you make of what's already happened here?
Look, there's a thing in politics that you never waste a good crisis, and I do believe that's what the government decided to do, because I was for this bill when it comes to we couldn't have students, medicals, doctors who are going to be delayed because of doctors not providing a study. But now the bill that they put forward is way above and puts so much power to the government that was not even discussed before. And the problem is that they passed the law, and now you hear the health minister and the premier basically saying we have 60 days to negotiate. That's not how it happens. Normally, you negotiate, and after you agree on a bill, and you pass the bill. Now they pass already the bill with those things that are very, putting penalties, for example, on doctors and forcing this and that. And after saying, oh, well, we're still open to negotiation, they're really, really doing the thing forward. And I do believe that the doctors are right when they say that the government was negotiating in fast pace, because the way the bill is drafted, especially that it's more than 100 pages, it's not like it's been drafted in 48 hours. I do believe that they were working on it for a long time.
Where does it go from here? You have doctors now actually out in front of the National Assembly protesting. As I said, there are going to be challenges here.
Yes.
The government gave no indication before passing this that it was prepared to really do very much of anything. I think Christian Dubé all along seemed like he was just doing the dirty work here for the premier with no intention of really reaching a deal at all. So what happens now? Because it seems to me the CAC and now the PQ apparently are saying, yeah, we would go ahead and support this government as well as far as doctors are concerned. Does this seem like a smart idea to you?
But I mean, the Minister Dubé said it that he needs to explain this bill better, and that they need to make more effort to explain to doctors and to Quebecers what this bill is all about. But the problem is that you do this before, you don't do this once you already decided on what are the conditions, and after trying to do basically saying, oh, it's good and I'm going to go and talk to people. So I do understand why doctors are angry just because they were negotiating. I am for the idea of linking a part of their salary to performance. I think that everybody has it if you work. But the way that it was presented, the way that it was voted, I do believe that they used the pretext of students not getting their medical license and basically putting everything in it while they've been discussing it for months and months with another bill, that the bill that they passed late Friday night, Saturday morning, was way above and beyond what was discussed before.
Did I hear you say you support this idea of linking their pay to performance?
I do believe that a certain percentage, yes, I do believe that everybody needs to show how many patients they have and how many patients they're taking care of. But at the end of the day, I do believe that the government went too far when it comes to basically forcing them and even putting penalties and even saying, if you're going to talk about this bill, maybe, this is something that you're not allowed to do, which in my sense goes too far.
And are you not concerned that we're going to have doctors retire or choose to leave or practice somewhere else by virtue of this?
Yeah, I do believe, yes, I believe it's a risk. That's why it needed to be a negotiated agreement. Don't forget that did happen this in Ontario. It happened in British Columbia with the kind of the same deal, but it was a negotiated deal and not a deal that was imposed by a special law in the middle of the night and after the government saying, let's sit down and have a talk.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Rudy, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
No, thank you, Aaron.
Introducing Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio. Hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
Join me for an insider look on a wild ride through 40 years of global rock and roll.
Bryan Adams Radio. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app. Or ask your smart speaker to play Bryan Adams Radio on iHeartRadio.
Who's ready to rock?
Kids wanna rock.